If everybody will settle in a little bit, we'll get started. Want to be respectful of your time. We're waiting on our city manager to come. She was giving the tour of the city offices this morning, so she'll be joining us here as we get started. Thank you very much for coming out on this spring day. This is your meeting. This is your town hall meeting. We are looking for feedback and we need your input. So please don't be shy about that. My name is Sean Keogh. I'm the mayor here in Dexter. I'd like to introduce those that are up here around the podium with me and that will be helping present today and answer questions. On my left, Paul Cousins, if you just raise your hand. Zach Michels, Donna Fisher, Scott Bell, Jim Smith, Julie Knight. To my right, from Partners in Architecture, our lead architectural consultant, David Gasson.
Morning.
Justin Breyer, our assistant to the city manager. Chief Robert Smith, chief of the Dexter Area Fire Department. Carol Jones, our recording secretary, will be taking some notes and trying to get all the questions down. Did I miss anybody? In the back, I believe we have representatives from the sheriff's office here for later as we need questions related to that. So thank you for all for coming. Just wanted to do a brief review of the agenda. I'm going to provide a brief overview of our current status of the facilities that we're talking about today. I'm then going to turn the meeting over to David for Partners in Architecture to present the bulk of the information. He's going to go over the detailed stuff that we've looked at, the options, the costs, everything from existing conditions to the various concept schemes that are on the poster boards around the room today. We'll then have a healthy dose of hopefully questions from you. Please don't be shy about asking a question. And if you haven't signed in, I want to remind everyone we do have sign-in sheets at the table nearest to the door. We would appreciate you recording your name and contact information. And then following the Q&A, because some of this information might be difficult to see on the screen, the presentation boards are meant to be interactive stations. Members from Partners in Architecture will be out there to let you look up close at the different options and to help you maybe generate other questions or thoughts, but to understand the detail of those options. So hopefully everybody knows where our city offices are. Currently they're located on the second floor of the PNC Bank building. We have approximately 1,700 square feet with very little short or long-term storage. Our current space includes one small conference room that serves as a catch-all for just about everything. Employee lunches, storage, meetings, collating. We have 7 full-time employees in that office, plus an intern, who work in small cubicles. There are no offices with doors, walls, up the ceilings. There's very little privacy. Overall, the space is functional, but it doesn't enhance our image, or at least I don't feel it does. And most importantly, I believe our employees deserve a better environment to work in as they lead our city. I believe the consensus of council and staff is that we need a new space of approximately 7,000 square feet. It addresses those issues and includes a public meeting room for functions like this. We spend a great deal of time trying to schedule meetings at places that we don't control, and it's often difficult. So we have explored options for leasing, and you'll hear about some of those today, leasing other space in town. But the general consensus of council is we would like to own our own space. Several options will be shared today. Our sheriff's substation is approximately 1,200 square feet, and it's adjacent to our firehouse. The substation is in a prominent location on Main Street near our park. You see the cars parked outside in the front, so hopefully everybody knows where that is. It's pretty obvious. I think that's important. The city is required to provide space for our sheriff as part of our contract with the Washington County Sheriff's Office, and we've been doing that for many years. The needs evaluation that we did in communicating with the Sheriff's Office is that they would like to have approximately 2,500 or 2,600 square feet. Many of their rooms they use for dual roles now, and they could use a little more space as well. So we have options to share with you that leave our sheriff and fire station together, both renovation and in new locations. And we have options to put city offices in our sheriff together, both renovations and new locations, and we'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Our fire station is approximately 8,000 square feet and houses 2 full-time firefighters on each shift. The building is structurally sound, but the station needs to be expanded and modernized to serve our goals in the future. It has been in service for over 35 years as a fire station, but the building itself, I believe, is closer to 60 years old. The existing fire station serves as the main station for the Dexter Area Fire Department. Our fire chief stays there 40 hours a week. It's our administrative lead station for the area. We are partnered with Dexter Township and Webster Township on the Dexter Area Fire Department. And firefighters respond to runs in the city of Dexter and to runs in Dexter to Webster Township from that station. Response times from the existing station are generally within the desired 4-minute response for runs within the city limits. They're longer as you get out into the townships. Several concepts have been developed to show that there is ample space at the main station to have larger vehicle bays, updated decontamination areas, more living and office space, and additional meeting storage or exercise space if needed. We have also explored other locations for a new station location. The most recently talked about location is commonly referred to as the MAV property. It's the vacant property across from Mill Creek Middle School. It's for sale for just under $600,000. Response times to downtown, to Dexter Township and Webster Township will generally increase from that location. Generally speaking, the options you will hear about today are more expensive for building a new station than renovating the existing station. But we have details on all of that. The last little piece of information I wanted you to share is just some run data. It's just basic totals. Because as a fire department, as one community that supports the fire department, this is sort of the geographic shape of our response area. And the city of Dexter is at the bottom. I don't know if you can see a little black dot somewhere right here. That's where our current station is, approximately, as best I could get a period on the map. The city represents about 30% of the runs, and about 70% of the runs are to our north, either to the northwest or to the northeast. So that, again, my goal was to provide a little bit of background information on our existing facilities. I'd like to turn it over to, or hold on one more second. I want to go over the goals. So again, I mentioned this is your meeting. The primary goal of the meeting is to provide an opportunity for you, residents, business owners, community members, to discuss this topic. We're interested in your opinion on need, what you see, do we need to do it? Location, are the locations important? And cost. Ultimately, how much are you willing to spend? To fund any of these improvements, it's likely that we would need to get a tax increase voted in by our residents. Depending on the options, that could be up to 2.5 to 3 mills, depending on what point in time we do that and which options are selected. So, thank you for letting me open the meeting. I'd like to welcome David Gasson. Justin, if you want to, make sure I get out of this okay.
Thanks, Mayor. Use the tab. Good morning, everybody. Again, thank you, Sean. Appreciate the introduction and also the brief overview. Again, my name is David Gasson. I'm a principal with Partners in Architecture. I've been working with the city for about 5 years now, studying the various things we're going to cover today. Also with me is Brian Hines. He is a senior architect with the firm, been intimately involved in the process along the way, and he and I together are going to kind of do an overview, so you'll hear both of us a little bit along the way, and then we'll both be available, as Sean mentioned, after the presentation to answer questions or to mingle with you and answer questions directly to the schemes that are on the easels that Brian has set up. Put that right there. Can I just ask, has anyone here participated in the 2 previous town hall meetings, or everybody kind of new? A few of you have. Well, good. I'm glad you're returning, and I'm really glad to see the new faces. So you're going to hear possibly new information for those that have attended prior. Some of it's going to be, or most of it will be a refresher. The overall process that I'm going to cover wasn't just Brian and I. It was a much broader group of people, including other people from our office as well as engineering disciplines, and then primarily the city staff for City Hall administration, and also fire staff to work through the process of looking at the assessment, looking at the needs, and looking at the possible concepts. So I'm going to jump right into the PowerPoint, and I'll invite you to ask questions if you have any along the way. I won't mind that, but I am going to try to keep it in a pretty streamlined process so we could finish in about 40 minutes. I'll try to respect your time this morning. But please feel free, if you have a question, just blurt it out or raise your hand if that's okay with you, Mayor. If I can take questions along.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. The summary overview that we're going to do is we're going to cover the existing assessment that we went through, which primarily covers the conditions, deficiencies or opportunities that we saw with the City Hall situation right now, and also the fire. And then we're also going to cover the needs, which we went through in a programming phase. And as Sean mentioned, response times were really important through this process, so we're going to cover that in a little more detail. We're going to go through the concept schemes that we explored, the various different locations, whether new or renovation or a combination with an addition. In total, it's probably around 20 different schemes that we've looked at. We're not going to share all of those with you today, but the ones that really surface to the top as viable options, we'll go through those. And then we're going to summarize it in terms of comparing them, in terms of their pros or cons, their features, the characteristics, and also the costs in some way. And we're obviously going to have a real session of questions and answers, we hope, or at least dialogues and comments from you. Any questions before I get started? Yes, sir.
David, I just would like to understand better your firm's experience. How many fire stations have you designed that have actually been built?
2 have been completed and 2 are in construction right now as a firm. But as individuals that work for the firm, many, many more than that. I'd say a dozen or so more than that as individuals in experience.
And where's the closest one that's been built?
City of Rochester is finished, and City of Grosse Pointe is under construction right now. City of East Point is a renovation / addition. I don't know which one you'd call closer, Grosse Pointe or City of East Point.
Thank you.
But just to give you a general makeup, our firm is comprised of individuals that focus their career and their experience and their knowledge base on public architecture. All we do is public entity work. Public safety happens to be a major focus of what we do. So police, fire, first responders, emergency operations are, in essence, what we're made of. We do other public work, but 100% virtually is in the public realm, just to give you an idea.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. So the needs assessment, or not the needs assessment, but the assessment of the facilities or conditional assessment really take a pretty broad look at what is that you're working with in terms of efficiency, operation, energy, consumption, code compliance, code deficiencies. So we look at a pretty broad base of issues and then really focus in on programmatic, functional, operational type, good things, bad things. And then we look at that in a number of other ways in terms of specifics, whether it be the site, the envelope, the interior, the mechanical, electrical, the infrastructure of the building. And in doing so, we created a report. I'm not going to cover that today, but it was a pretty detailed report that itemizes individual items and then gives some recommendation, and it also has some corresponding cost if you were going to try to rectify that issue. And I think that's available through the city from previous publications. Site assessment, we looked at, and our initial task was to look at Main Street Fire Station, Sheriff Substation, and the city offices across the street. So in a site analysis, generally the way we start to look at what are the possibilities, what are the limitations or challenges of working with the site. And this generally summarizes what we would be working with in terms of the boundaries, constraints, and opportunities within the site. And I won't go through it in a lot of detail, but you can imagine it's the things of access, prevailing winds, views, and then just generally infrastructure and limitations based on setback, property lines, and topography, which the site has quite a bit. It also considers vehicular and pedestrian walkways and circulation around and to the site. A couple of sample photographs for both the fire station and the city offices. You can see just in general some of the tight corridors, multi-use in the lower right is conference room, training room, staff meeting area, also a fire inspector's office area, and it's also adjacent to the dorm. So there's a lot of different things happening in some very small spaces and inadequate spaces. And then lower left is kind of the watch area, workroom, lunchroom, kitchen, and also you can see the staff shower, locker room. We're getting a glimpse of it. Within one eye shot, you cover probably 4 major components, very inadequately and laid out space-wise, but as in most situations, when we look at municipal entities, the staff, administration, leadership is very good at making what they have work, and that's no different here. They do a pretty good job of making it work for them to do what they need to do to serve the community. That's just a couple of the photographs. We probably had several hundred in our overall report, and then again, those were itemized to a line item in the report in reference to a photograph, so you could see the description of the issue and how it looked from a photograph. City offices, very similar in terms of number of photographs and how we related it to the report. Sean mentioned in his introduction that it's functional and it works, although you can see here how they have to maneuver just in general with kind of things on top of things, and they certainly could be improved. And we'll kind of move on from there with the programming. Brian, did you want to kind of touch on a couple of programs?
Sounds good.
The programming step was after the assessment, which was basically going to help define the needs after working with user groups.
Yeah, so through this process, we worked side by side with the city, and we've conducted a needs validation assessment through meetings where we, with the users, to determine the required capacity in terms of personnel, vehicles, and all of the new or renovated spaces that we're planning on improving or developing new. We developed a programming list of existing spaces and mapped out complete lists of recommended and required spaces based on recommendations from the Unified Facilities Criteria. It's basically a document that developed by the Department of Defense. It's kind of like a national standard that a lot of the, it's not a requirement, but it's a great document that kind of goes through all the specifics of fire stations. So that we use that standard to kind of develop all the spaces to make sure that the required needs are met. From there, we arrived at the optimal square footage for the buildings, and the functional spaces that we've seen that were lacking in the Main Street station included a lot of inadequate space throughout the apparatus bays. It's very tight in there, not a real safe working environment when it comes to fast response times, pulling vehicles in and out of there quickly. Also, a lot of spaces are generally used multi-purposefully, and they should be broken out separately. Like the PPE equipment is basically stored within the bays themselves, and also they're doing their PPE washing as you've seen in some of the previous photos, all within that bay. So there isn't really a great watch desk with views of being able to see those apparatus come in and out of the apparatus bays, and they don't have a fitness room, locker rooms, day rooms. There's some multi-purpose rooms that are kind of using all those functions all at once, but a lot of times you want to separate these spaces through means of sound separation, that you might not have the day room right next to the gathering spaces. So after that, we took all of the needs and we developed kind of functional bubble diagrams, and which helped organize how we are to fit each function in either the existing station on Main Street or one of the many site options the city has requested to explore. So I want to hand it back over to David. He's going to discuss the many schemes that we covered. I think he said over 20, but we kind of narrowed it down to the ones that we felt that are most appropriate and most cost-effective approaches of providing a new or renovated station.
Thanks, Brian. Before I get into the scheme, I'm just going to cover response times. I saw as I walked in a couple looked like handouts of response time maps. I assume that you had those as you walked in, or they were in your chair. Is that right?
They're on the table.
Okay, on the table. So this is probably going to cover the same thing that you had before, but as a major component to our continuation of the study, as we began, we really looked at two major sites, and that was Main Street and the Dan Hoey site. But as we explored, we saw that there were other opportunities that might be viable solutions in terms of location. So we studied those through a response time mapping system. And here's a number of them. And Main Street, I think just as a comparison, if your color graphic is clear or matches this, it's two things. Within the 4 8-minute response time range, there's area within the fire area, and there's area outside of your fire area. So we try to color code the 4 minutes within, the 8 minutes within, and the 4 minutes without, and then the 8 minutes without. So geographically, you're covering the same area, but you're covering a certain portion that's in your fire area. And then indicated on there was how many residents or how many business locations you actually covered. Sean's graphic indicated responses to events or calls based on the different 3 different stations within the area. So this adds a little bit more information to it in terms of households served or businesses served. And I'll kind of skip through them real quickly, and we can go through them a little more carefully if you want on the boards in the back, but I think there's a couple things I want to highlight. So the difference is there's Main Street, and there's Webster Church Road, and then there's the township, and then Dexter, Ann Arbor.
David, go a little slower on those. Back up. Show them where the stations are and
Okay.
the boundary and what the colors mean, please.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Brian, if you'd point those out. So we have the Main Street, the green dot there, or blue dot, as it is. The overall area, you can see a heavy dashed dot line. It's black, rectangular in form. That's the service area. The pink area to the top is the 8-minute zone within the area. And then the yellow area above that dash line, with the circle that, Brian. That's the 4-minute area, and you can see it's really relative to the roadway, which is how you'd service the area. That's the 4-minute area within the district, I'll call it. And then below that, we have the 2 different colors, the blue and kind of that gray, bigger area. That's the 4 and 8-minute area covered from that station outside of your fire district.
I have a question, please.
Yes, sir.
When does the clock start running on these times that you're putting up here?
When the call comes in.
So you're going all the way back and including the call receipt, the dispatch time, and the drive time?
Well, some of that doesn't cross over. The call comes into the station after dispatch time.
Okay, so we're talking about when the firefighters get alerted to the fact that there's a call.
Right.
That's when your clock starts running.
Correct. And generally you want to be on the road within 60 seconds. Chief, I'm correct on that's the way you clock it, right?
Yeah, when the call comes into the fire station and the tones drop, we basically have 60 seconds to get out the door. Once we get out the door and call in route, then that's when dispatch starts that 4-minute time that we have to get there.
Does this include traveling within the fire station, getting from where you are into the vehicle and moving out, or is it once you're in the vehicle and you start turning the wheels?
It's in the vehicle. The 60 seconds is generally the guide. I know there's a call, I'm getting myself onto the apparatus and out the door.
So this is essentially traveling time in the vehicle.
Is that correct, Chief? It is not including the 1 minute.
So I think that where this data come from is important. This is calculated data based on RAND travel, normal travel speeds. So basically, when they put these charts together, they look at that point of where the fire station is, and if you were in your car and started driving, then they're going to measure that point. And so this is normal traffic, as if you're sitting in your car and you just said go and started your watch. It's based on an average of 35 miles an hour to get from point A to point B, and that's how they derive these charts. So this is nothing about our operation and actually what we do. We drive differently. This is just an estimation. It's a guesstimation, if you will. There's nothing exact about it for the fire station.
And we didn't clock any of this. This is all based on the computer program. Did that answer your question?
At least I know where you're starting.
Okay.
How realistic it is and how not realistic it is.
And that's very relative to a lot of things, weather condition, traffic jams, issues of construction. There's a lot of things that could impact that. But anything other than that, Chief?
There's plenty of things, and that's why we have to use the computer models, because even if we try to use, let me stand up better, even if we tried to use dispatch data to develop these time stamps that we're running, the dispatch data is not always accurate as it gets to us after the run, because it depends on, when a dispatcher downtown, if we radio en route, they might put us en route right away, and that creates a timestamp, or they could do a couple of other functions and then reach over and put us en route. So to have actual 100% verifiable numbers is just not possible with our dispatch system. So this is strictly a non-emergent response or non-emergent drive model from a point to another point, or from a point to say how far can you get in 4 minutes. And that's why you see some of the strings that are just little lines there. That's because some roads are faster than others, and some main roads you can get there quicker. You'll see some areas, for instance, on the left-hand side of the bottom left-hand side, it actually looks like some of the roads further to the bottom that you can get to much faster than some of them that are closer to the fire station. Again, that's because of the type of road and the number of turns and things of that nature.
It is really just used as, it's a tool for comparing at some baseline.
And we did also take the response times and did map them as individual points and showed them with different coloring on as far as, okay, this response time took 5 minutes. It was a green or a blue. And then we mapped it out that way, but it didn't nearly show as much of a proper response on an actual road, taking the road along, having an area that shows, because once you get these outliers that, okay, something happened that obviously changed it, it's hard to map that outlier as being part of that overall 5-minute response, because it might have been closer or further away than what you with the map data. So using the drive times is a more accurate way of doing that than the actual individual specific points on what happened that day during that response.
What Brian's referring to was early in the process, before we did this mapping, we used actual data provided by the city with runs on one year. I don't remember which year it was. But we used addresses and actual log time to show the extent of reach. That's not shown here, but that was important information for us to at least understand more thoroughly the Main Street site. So that was one of our early exercises.
And please understand that not every response starts from the station. Sometimes our firefighters are actually out on a call and get another call. So when the data is recorded, the start time, the start place isn't necessarily the same for every run. This is trying to illustrate from the station to a point.
Can you read the numbers as you flip through these?
Sure, yeah, we'll do that. Would you point out the station when we get to each one?
Yep.
So for Main Street, 4-minute businesses or 257. For 8 minutes, it's 506. For housing units, 1,164, and that's 4 minutes. And 8 minutes is 3,961. And that comparison, because I'm not going to be able to flip back and forth, just for information, the Dexter Ann Arbor Road is the most comparable of the 6 that we're going to show you in terms of houses serves or business serves, and I'll just read those now since those numbers are fresh. 4-minute drive time for businesses is 265 or 255, so slightly less than Main Street. In 8 minutes for businesses, 661, higher than Main Street. For housing units, it's 4 minutes, 1,365, and for 8 minutes, it's for housing is 4345. I'll cover the other ones as well as we flip through them, but as a comparison, I thought those are the only 2 that are close. I thought I'd read those directly one behind the other. And then, and not in this order, I'm showing the ones that are within the service area on the map. So this is Webster Church Road. So you see the blue dot is the location. The color coding is the same. The pink within the area is the 8-minute reach. The yellow within the area is the 4-minute reach. And then likewise below that or outside the area, it's the same corresponding. Light blue is within 4, which is none or very, very little. And then the grayer mauve color is the 8-minute reach.
And just for reference, this is the Dexter city limits that you're seeing here in the orange.
Thank you, Brian.
And also, that's a station, a future station location in Webster Township. It's an unmanned station today. Webster Township is going through a process to build their own station in approximately that location. John, is that correct?
Yeah, I would just...
John is a Webster Township trustee.
Yeah, I'm John Sharp, I'm a township trustee at Webster Township, and I understand the data that you're presenting here, but it may be misleading because that response time requires a person there, and there are no people there.
That's
So
right.
it's just a garage with an apparatus, or maybe not even an apparatus. So I don't think that this particular map serves the communication very well.
Well, thank you, John. I appreciate you pointing that out. Again, it's just a relative comparison. For instance, if other things were equal, if it were manned, that would be the relative comparison. But thank you for pointing out that the situation isn't true to the graphic necessarily.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yes,
Can I
ma'am.
ask, there is a John?
Yes.
So if there's a station there right now that's not staffed, does it have equipment in it?
I defer to the chief.
Does it have equipment?
Yes, it has an engine out there right now, and it is picked up occasionally by some of our paid-on-call folks. We have part-time people or paid-on-call people that live in that area. So
Okay.
if we get a significant event, somebody would pick that engine up and drive it.
So from what it just sounded like there were plans to either enhance or add to or build this substation, is that what it's called?
Yeah, we're planning to build a substation. I would expect 18 months from now, we'll have a fully functional fire station there with one 24-hour firefighter there at that location with apparatus.
So essentially you'll have a smaller fire station.
7,400 square feet roughly.
Okay, and it'll be staffed and it'll have equipment.
Correct.
And it will service that area of Webster Township.
It will service the entire DAFD area as well as doing mutual aid for other communities.
Okay, and it's 7,000 square feet?
7,500 roughly. It's on paper at the moment, so it could change.
And it's on paper, is it actually, are you planning for it and it's going to be built, or are you still in the exploratory stage?
No, we're quite far along. We're doing our very best to get the most bang for our buck. There's no doubt in my mind that the board is pro building the fire station. The question is at what price? And I think that you face the same question here. How much are you willing to spend for what you're going to get?
Right. And may I ask you about what the prices are?
We have a soft number right now of $2.8 million. I expect that number to go down, but I don't expect it to go down by very much.
Okay, the next is Territorial Road, Township Station. Again,
That's an existing station. That's Station 2 for DAFD.
yeah, and that's recently constructed in the last 4 or 5 years, something in that range. And again, the color code represents the same thing. The pink is within the fire area, it's the 8-minute, and the yellow, the 4-minute. And there's some area outside the area that is regional within the 8-minute, kind of the gray color. Just to kind of go back now for the businesses reached in that station is 16 within 4 minutes.
So this is the MAV site. This is the vacant property across from Mill Creek School
I'm sorry.
as a comparative location for a potential new station within the city of Dexter.
Thank you. I'm going to go backwards. I must have clicked that before I wanted to respond to your question reading the numbers out. So this is the, that's okay, together, we jumped ourselves ahead. This is the Territorial Road. So that station reach within 4 minutes is 16 businesses, 69 within 8 minutes, housing units, 356 within 4 minutes, and 1,461 within 8 minutes. I'm going to go backwards now on the Webster. So when that's ready, we're basically mapping in that location, we would be looking at within the 4 minute, 23 businesses, 138 within 8 minutes. For housing, within 4 minutes is 357, and within 8 minutes is 1,604.
Ask a question.
Yes, sir.
So if today there's a fire at 5665 Webster Church Road, is it being covered by what I call our fire department here?
Yes, the Dexter Area Fire Department, actually, we cover all 3 municipalities, so anytime there's an event in any one of the townships, then all of the stations, everybody goes out of all of the different stations. So with 2 people here in the city and 1 at Dexter Township, we get a call in Webster Township, you're getting 3 people and 3 different apparatus to go to that. When we have a call in the city, everybody from the Webster Township station, or the Dexter Township, they'll bring a rig into the city as well, and so it's a full response for us to no matter which municipality.
Thank you, Chief. This is the Dexter Ann Arbor Road area that we studied, and as the Mayor was saying, that's the MAV site. The blue dot Brian pointed to within the city area, you can see it's outside the, I'll call it the, it's in the city, in the area, and colors represent the same as previous. The red within the area is 8 minutes, the yellow, generally it's centered in, is within the 4 minutes, and then very little blue and very little gray outside of the fire area is served. The houses and businesses I mentioned earlier, but I'll repeat them again. So within 4 minutes, businesses served 255. Within 8 minutes is 661. And then for housing, 1365 within 4 minutes, and then 4345 within 8 minutes. Edison Street response time. You can see this is just one of the other areas that we looked at. And there's many more than this that we actually looked at, but these are the ones we're showing you. Businesses within 4 minutes is 153. Within 8 minutes is 397. Housing units, 606 within 4 minutes, and 1,036 within 8 minutes. Dexter Chelsea Road. It's kind of right there in the center, also blue dot. Color code, same thing there.
This
4
is-
minutes.
That's commonly the Legion property. We were evaluating whether a new station at the Legion property would be beneficial. So, apologize. I'm trying to correlate the address for you to the common location.
That's helpful.
Thank you, appreciate that.
The Edison one.
Vacant property on Edison near the Adair or the DTE substation. Again, our goal was to look around the area for vacant land that we could, if we were going to build a new station, what are the options today without taking down a house or a building?
For this site, 4 minutes. For businesses, 218, 8 minutes, 528. Housing units, 1,097 within 4 minutes, and 3,790 within 8 minutes. And we have those on boards in the back. They probably correlate to the ones that you had on the tables when you came in, and we'll be available to look at those more up close and talk about that with you afterwards a little bit more. We're covering quite a bit of material, very condensed as compared to what we reviewed when we were in process, and we're trying to share to you with as much clarity as possible so you could, one, get an understanding or at least form a question in any way you may have. So I'm going to cover some of these in some detail. I'm just going to bullet point a couple of them because I'm not going to show you the scheme, but I'm going to note that we did do some schemes. So for the fire stations, we looked at a number of them. Main Street, which is the existing site, the Dan Hoey site, which was one of our original task sites that you own and did own then, in terms of putting a new station there. And then after looking at those in quite lengthy look at those, we looked at a number of other ones. A property on Joy Road, 2nd Street, Dexter, Chelsea Road, Edison Street, Dexter, Ann Arbor, the MAV site that was mentioned, Ann Arbor Street, which is the Copeland site right where we are right now. Looked at the possibility of a new build or an addition to the existing building, using some of the existing building as well. And we also did a real brief study at looking at potentially repurposing the St. Joseph's Church property. So there were a number of different locations, and there were at least a handful for many of these that we did iterations of, well, that might be 10 different sites, so maybe 3 or 4 or 5 different iterations per site. So a lot of different options went into at least the first look, and then working with the facilities group and administration kind of narrowed it down to a couple that we thought were viable, and some of those are what we're going to show you today. As far as the city offices go, we studied a couple of, I'll call it generic versions of how we would meet the program, the needs that were described, and working with the staff in terms of how would they better do their job if they could ideally lay out their space, relate to other employees or other functions within the city, accommodate all the equipment they might need within the space or the materials they're going to need to do their job and so forth. And all those things added up to the programmatic space, and then we generically designed it, I'll say, to a square foot to reach a budget. And that was left as is for a while. And at some point during the process, a site was identified, and we'll show you a plan of that, or at least it's on a board in the back, where each one of the identified spaces that would be needed as we not look at just today's city functions, but 20 years into the future, how do you accommodate some expansion if needed, or flexible space because we know things change.
Right.
So,
under the city offices concepts, did anyone explore the purchase or rental feasibility of the country market property?
I don't know that directly, but maybe I'm seeing a couple of heads shaking them. Apparently not, sir. But there were a number of others, and as noted here, Monument Park, and that's, when we look at the plan back there, there was a tenant space within that building at one time. Perhaps it's still there. available. We laid out a space to accommodate the needs in the program. And then there's a couple other, the Broad Street property, Jeffords, Ann Arbor Street, which is repurposing a portion of the building next door or adjoining this building. And we have some plans of that on the board in the back that kind of show how that would work. And then as part of our initial task was, what if 8140, the existing Main Street fire station, were to be relocated somewhere else? How could that be repurposed as City Hall? So that was a scheme that was studied in some detail, actually great detail. And that's on the board back there as well. So those are the things we're going to cover. And I'll say before I get into it, I'm doing this more in a descriptive overview. It's not going to be floor plans for each of them. It's really going to talk about, here's the site, here's the configuration, showing that a test for fit works, and describing in two different parts of this, the components, whether it be fire, sheriff, city, parking, and other amenities. Basically those four things: fire, city, sheriff, and parking. Are they accommodated in these site arrangements? But if we want to look at some detail, it's they're on boards in the back, and we'll go through that. So, here's the Main Street site, and I'll use some reference that we used in the process. So this is an A version of how we would re-equip this site for the look into the future for fire, sheriff, city, and this component has also a major parking component to it. And that was not necessarily part of the initial kind of wish list, but it became a byproduct almost of how the rest of the buildings were coming together, and the alignment of things made it almost like, well, it's a good idea to maybe put parking on top of this new building. So below that pink parking to the top, kind of right there, our city functions below that, and you'll see that in the floor plan concept in the back. And I think maybe right now I'll just say footnote, these are really high-level conceptual ideas of how these things could come together. There's a lot of detail that would have to be worked out once a direction was selected by the city in terms of which one they wanted to pursue. So none of these are nailed down by any means. There's a lot of wiggle room and a lot of need left to develop any of these concepts into a real plan. But you'll see generally how that lays out below the parking.
Sir?
Yes, sir?
On the previous screen, you had fire station and city offices. Are we to assume that the sheriff component of this is always linked to fire station?
That's a great question, but the answer is no. That's a natural assumption because they're kind of compatible, and we looked at that as a sharing of spaces, because there are some spaces that are necessary for both, that if we could do it just one time and they share, it'd be more economical. So generally we did do that, but there is certainly a scheme that specifically says sheriff and city offices could be together at Main Street. I think it's B3 version of the scheme where it worked out rather well, but for the most part, the sheriff is linked to the fire.
Do they serve the same area as the fire department?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yes. I think the answer is yes, generally, but yes.
Same building.
I mean, the deputies move freely across community boundaries, whether it's into Scioto Township, but we are partnered with our current substation. The partners are the same communities: Webster Township, Dexter Township, and the city share the deputies that are assigned to that area. Lisa King is here to answer any questions later on sheriff responses.
Great question, sir. Appreciate that. So this is our A1 site, which basically includes everything plus the parking. A couple of things I'm going to point out, I think were features that became real focus of a conversation in the process of trying to figure out how we could best use this site and really capitalize on a lot of different things besides just the function of fire, city, and sheriff. So I'm going to indicate by arrow a couple things that we tried to bring into the picture. So this is an accessible access point from Main Street in Alpine that gets you to the park via an elevator. So we thought that was important. We were going to move things vertically up and down in the building. We thought, well, let's do a little bit nicer and make it a public feature, not just a public safety function for the facility. Parking, as I mentioned, wasn't initially one of the things we were trying to include, but as a byproduct, this made a lot of sense to include deck level parking off of Alpine, not just to serve the building, but the downtown in general. And then here's covered parking for sheriff or fire. I think in this case it was fire. And then from the park area, one of the things we really wanted to include was public restrooms. So in most cases in redeveloping Main Street, we were able to put public restrooms in that wouldn't necessarily need you to have access into fire or sheriff. It could be a separate lobby to a restroom. And I'd say even though we don't necessarily have it, it was a feature that we talked about enough that we could make it one in any one of the versions that were to redevelop Main Street. This is a A2, a slightly different version of that. And I'll say A1 was a very conceptual, how does a test for fit kind of work together? A2 was more or less, let's take that to the next level, and it really worked out some of the generalizations of how the fire and the sheriff would be accommodated within the existing building. And I'll describe this as almost like A2 was a dismissal of A1, because A2 rectified some of the things that we were wrestling with over A1. So A2 became a kind of next level solution. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to ask, well, if you're going over each of these concepts and plans and addressing who it's going to accommodate, fire and or sheriff and or city, could you also give us a ballpark on the pricing for that plan?
I will summarize. In the end, as a comparison, I will do that more concisely, so you can see A1, A2, A3 with the pricing to it.
Okay.
I think that'll be better. I could call it out right now.
I mean, it's just nice to have the price associated with the picture.
All right, I will do that. I'll attempt to do that.
Sorry, I hate to mess up. I'm not trying to mess up your
No.
presentation.
I am flexible, so let's see how flexible.
You can go back to after you kind of, yeah, like, talk about each one and then come back. Because if you're ruling out one versus the other as you're going along.
I'm not going to do that every time, but I'm glad you kind of caught what I was saying there. Version number 1 was $7,050,000. The one that we kind of call it dismissed, or at least found a better solution, put all the same parts to it, and that's where we are now, which is A2. The A2 does all the same things I tried to describe as A1, does it more efficiently, and also has a little bit more cost to it because we worked out some other items within it, namely more addition to the fire station, police station. So I'm going to back up to the programming step. We were trying to take deficiencies that we all acknowledge were issues. Some of those were really relative to we need more area. We just need more square footage, not just do things differently. We need more area to do what we need to do. A1 didn't have enough area in it, so A2 kind of worked that out. And that's a very normal evolution in the design process. You don't get the answer the first time you come up with a solution, and you work with the user group, fire and city administration in these two cases, and you kind of advance the thoughts. That's what A1 and A2 did. So it got bigger, it got more costly, but it got more solidly right. Yes, ma'am.
The difference between one difference between A1 and A2 is that is the color of the parking structure you're talking about. Is an A2, is that a multi-deck parking structure? It looks not. It looks
Well, as you're answering that, my understanding is the A concepts haven't really been under real consideration for at least 5 years. So can we kind of do them a bit more quickly so we have the rest of the 45 minutes to be the more
yes Thank you.
relevant.
I'm going to try to balance that with answering some questions, but you pointed out the differences. The parking deck is a little different one to the other. The platform is one, the deck is number 2, or A2.
So this isn't under consideration?
No.
What are we looking at?
So, yeah.
I'm trying to do an overview, so maybe I'll state that before I get to an option, so I can just kind of brush over it, if you will.
If it's not under consideration.
I'll take a couple more questions, and I'm going to move back in. Yes, ma'am? Did you have
I
more?
think we're just all confused. So is it that 8140 is not under consideration anymore? Or, I mean,
I would say.
or none of these are, or what, because we know that this stuff is on the website, and we can flip through the different processes, and that these are on the website, so we can all walk back and go through those. So which ones are under consideration that we can provide feedback towards?
Yes.
That's what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Shall I jump to the final kind of consideration?
So we're trying to show you the history of what is, we're trying to show you the history of the thought that's been developed over the last 5 years. These were the initial steps,
Yeah.
okay? I think within the last year, there was a 4-3 vote by council to not consider the fire station for a fire station. But
Yeah.
so that the people who haven't followed this, only a handful of you raised your hands at the start of this, it's important to understand what we've looked at and what the options actually are that have been brought forward to provide context, so that you can then decide, have we made the right decision or not? Okay? So we haven't voted on any of these.
Right.
We're looking for your feedback. David, I think you can move through some of these a little faster. They'll get the idea and they can spend the time on the boards. But we wanted to show you the thought process and the building process that we've been at to get there.
And I think it's worth adding too that, that 4-3 vote happened without public notice.
Yes.
It happened without a public discussion like this, where it had before, and there was some conversation, there was some, some excitement about this particular plan. Election happened, you had that vote. So I mean, I think that's the interesting thing about this, right? Is that it's no longer being considered because you went to a 4-3 vote.
Yes.
And so I think we should continue to hear these. And
Okay, I will try to keep it brief, but I'm going to try to really hit the issues, okay? And some of the arrows, the red arrows, were pointing out the features. I'm going to kind of skip over those because they do repeat themselves, but they're common. Yes, sir, make it quick in the
Just a
back.
comment for those of us in the back. Are the microphones on up in the right and left tables? And if they're not, can we be a little more?
No microphones today.
No microphones?
Am I well
We
heard?
use our teacher voice.
You are, Chief Smith and the mayor have been heard, but nobody else can hear anything.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Again, public access, parking, lower level restrooms. Next version, A3, really took away the parking, but really captured the same things. So that the main feature here, red arrow, is I'm bringing the building forward to continue the streetscape of Main Street, so it doesn't feel like a missing link along Main Street there. But same features within the building. Public access, low level restrooms. This is a little bit different. This is taking the fire station out of Main Street, moving it somewhere else. And at this point, we're really considering Dan Hoy as the site. Now there's others, but this version was studied thinking fire was going to be somewhere else. So it was a repurposing, renovation of the existing building, a nice fit in terms of square footages to accommodate city functions and a room of this type there, as well as the sheriff component and sheriff parking within the building. And it would also still accommodate the main features. So here we're saying it has presence on Main Street as a city hall, which we thought was an important feature. Public access to vertically get down to the park from an accessibility standpoint. And then the possibility of having restrooms on the lower level from the park as well. And then there's the sheriff would have under building, undercover parking, which was a feature, not a requirement, but a nice thing to have in terms of doing their first responder duties here.
And what's the approximated cost of that plan?
Thank you. Keeping me on my toes here. That is 2.9 million. That's the renovation repurposing of fire station into city hall, sheriff substation. This same site contemplating, let's take down what's there, even though it has good bones, good structure, good reuse potential, but would we have benefit if we take it down and start over? I mentioned earlier about bringing the building up to line up with Main Street for a streetscape purpose. This really kind of continues Main Street down that site and also really gives a good area for parking, significant amount of parking. I think it's 100 spaces we were able to add in a deck level format. But to give you a prominent city hall and sheriff exposure on Main Street in a new build scenario with parking just would require fire to be elsewhere. And at this point, we were looking at where the elsewhere was. And we have versions that would accommodate fire as a standalone, whether it be a MAV site or other. Main Street, right up on the corner, access into the facility for sheriff and fire, 24-hour lobby. Parking decks in there. This is 3 levels of parking for the downtown area. And then there's vertical circulation down to the park for those that need accessible means.
And sorry, cost there.
I was getting to that. Thank you. 6.664, so 6,640,000. And the major part of that is the parking as compared to the prior one, which was just under 3 million. It accomplished the same thing, but it was repurposing. So there's a little saving, obviously, in doing that. The next version is fire and city offices and sheriff on B3. I'm going to skip that one to go to just, it covers the same thing, but the major difference is there's a significant addition to accomplish the needs of the fire department in putting all 3 together. And you may remember A2 did that a little bit, but this is really taking a bigger look at some of the future growth possibilities. Sheriff, some vertical circulation down the park, and restrooms at the lower level. So that, I think, really looked at the Main Street in a lot of different ways. This one shows that same version of B3, but with the thing that we contemplated on a couple of early ones. What if we put in dedicated deck parking? This one would be multiple levels. And that's give or take. That's why it's a B3.1 and a B3. And there's your access to parking. After looking at it, and basically those really covered our initial task. Look at this site to redo these things with the possibility of the fire station being somewhere else. That was our initial charge. And then we really started getting into some other possibilities. Yes, ma'am, you had a question?
I was just going to ask the cost of the B3, B3.
Brian, we keep kicking you or something so I can remember that. Let's see. That is 5.65.
For B3 is 5.65?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's B3, yeah. 5,650,000.
For B3?
B3.
And are these 2019 construction costs?
These are current costs. Previously, if you've heard those before, they were different than this. Thank you very much. These have been escalated costs, as though you were going to make a decision sometime this year to move ahead. If it goes past this year, then the numbers have to be rebooted.
Including site work as well?
Site, total project cost. So that would be everything in the building, equipment, furnishings, soft costs, general conditions, overhead and profit for the builder, and your other associated fees. But thanks for that clarification. So after doing our initial task, we were looking at other sites, and the question was asked earlier, is this still under consideration? And I guess maybe after that time frame, we looked at another version of, let's revisit how do you make it cost less on Main Street and really meet the needs of the program as it has been evolved. And somewhere in this juncture, Chief was coming on board, and we had a good chance and a really good dialogue to kind of take a new, fresh look at the program and make it more in his vision, and also not just his vision, but more in industry standards and the way things were now a couple years later from when we first looked at it. So this accomplished the majority of those things in a new form of how do we address 8140 Main Street as a fire and sheriff's station at a more frugal cost approach, and this was the version of that, and I know the cost is going to come up, so let's see if I have that. I do. Yeah, that is 3.8 million. And that's all of fire, all of sheriff. And an area, when I say all of fire, I want to qualify that. So all of fire, when we were working together with this new program, included some additional things for fire services and training. This version, although it has the square footage, is not fully outfitted, and that would be to reduce the cost to the 3.8. So there's a training area at the lower level that's part of the addition, and you'll see it on the boards back there, that's called this it's white box. It's space that's built that could be outfitted at a future time. So it's the potential to be the full fire station, but not on day one. And therefore, it's less costly to build on day one. And that would be a multi-purpose space. So, or to be defined. Right now, it's just area. And then the other part to that, what we really tried to accomplish on the earlier version, so there's pointing out that's the major addition, the red part off to the left. So all of this is additional square footage. So you can see significantly that's what we were dealing with primarily before. We started inching over here with some additions. This really takes a bigger view of the program and really kind of satisfies that for the most part. And there's a lower level underneath that. And then another thing was sheriff's parking. This accommodates it differently. It moves it up to Alpine Street. And the idea was that how do we, functionally for fire, we don't want to have any commingling of vehicle maneuvering down here right now with sheriff. So we have sheriff off at Alpine, and then a bridge into the second level, which is currently the mezzanine training / dorm room of the fire. So we've repurposed that area. But the point was we were separating these two vehicle movements to improve or meet the goals of the fire, which was to have their free access. Even though it's a limited area, they don't have to compete with sheriff maneuvers. And then the lower level would have the public access for restrooms, even though some of it's not built out. The initial build would include the public restrooms on the lower level. The representation of how we would treat a new build on Dan Hoey. I won't go into that in any detail. That was, I'll say, dismissed as an idea, or at least put on the back burner. And then here's some other tests for fits. We went through a couple other sites in terms of response times. We looked at those sites that we covered in response time plus others. So other areas in town would accommodate it with some manipulations, and that's really basically the study of it. They didn't gain traction, so we didn't work out plans. This one is the MAVD site on Dexter, Ann Arbor. That was mentioned by the mayor. This one we really did, I think, a more full bore approach to it. So the revised program, the increased program, was designed, at least conceptually, to create this footprint, to show a truer footprint or test for fit. So the red is the fire, and there's two pieces of it. Basically, the apparatus bays are called bays, so it's a 5-bay station. And then the fire services side, training dorm, lifestyle part of fire station. And then the blue is the sheriff's that represents about 2,200 square feet, and we were teetering in that 2,000 square foot range for, or 24, 26 for their needs. But as I mentioned, the benefit of putting these two functions together for first responders is that there's common space that could be used for both. you pay for once. So this really kind of connects those, right where they're touching red and blue is where the crossover for those spaces. So fitness, training, conference, those areas, the main lobby building entry are all one and the same for both fire and sheriff. So that it had a lot of economy of scale in doing that. Any version, when you do that here or Copeland or even at Main Street, the same effect happens. You save money and your needs are met.
If you do this, there's no city offices on this, so you have to build all this plus 2 city offices.
That would be correct. Yep. And the cost for that is $6,600,000.
Does that?
Plus land.
That includes the person.
No, it does not include that. Does not, plus land.
Yes, correct. Plus land, it doesn't include costs.
And has this design been value engineered at all?
Not in the true sense of value engineering, but in the sense of let's look at it more closely, and the chief and I have done an initial review of that. Could it be less? Absolutely less. And I'll use a comparison. That site prior to this, that the value engineer's version of the A1s and A2 and A3 and the B1, 2, and 3, that's a value engineered version. So this would undergo the same process. We would look at, and it's really material choices. And when we're at this stage, we're generally looking at what's a good norm, what's a good balance. And when we say, okay, let's make it less expensive, there's certain things you want to not do, but there's certain things that are good things to put on the table. And material choices are some. And you would not want to necessarily do anything that would cause you to have to come in prior to the life cycle reaching its end and redo something. You don't want to be on the cheap side because you're going to pay for it sooner or later. So we'd look at frugal materials, but not cheap. And that would be a value engineering process.
What's the square footage of this project?
This is 20,200, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure it's 20,200.
How many people are there 24 hours?
The cheaper would be your full operation in terms of
2 firefighters, 24 hours, plus myself on a 40-hour week, and then the sheriff's department, they rotate in and out, but they're there 24 hours.
And I think we dormed it for 6, but Brian's going to check that. Maybe it is, folks.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
On this site, as I recall, the response times were far worse than 2 or 3 other sites, and you're putting away from most of your activities going north and west, and this puts it to the east of town.
That's a good question or observation. It's hard to, I think, hard to make a conclusion on that. When I look at the data, I'm showing relatively similar response meeting businesses and homes as Main Street, but the thing I can't tell you is how many of those numbers are outside of the area. I would suggest that a great number of them, more than on Main Street, are outside of the area. I'll go back, if you don't mind. So, the response area is maybe out, more of the response area is outside of, more of the responses are reached outside the area, but the numbers are greater as a comparison. And in fact, these numbers are the highest of all the ones we've done in terms of businesses they reach and homes they reach. It's just a matter of where are those homes and where are those businesses? Are they in the fire area or not? I suggest most of them are not, but I don't know that for sure.
That particular site, the numbers include just people within the Dexter area fire district, or is it?
No, all inclusive. It's within the color span you see on the graphic.
That's kind of misleading. It's right next to the red area, but it's actually, it includes both the 4 minutes within and without, or outside of the
This dark
Dexter area.
outline, all the way around, all colors, is their reach within 8 minutes.
So does
This blue and this gray is their reach outside of the district. So the gray area is outside the district.
is that counted in the numbers?
It is counted in the numbers, but I just can't distinguish how many of those numbers are in or out.
So if there's a fire in the gray area, are you guys covering it? Or we say outside the district, what does that mean?
Again, we respond to wherever we need to, but you have to understand the source of this chart is simply a computer model that shows our area. The important piece to look at is where the response times fall within the city of Dexter. And that's what was focused on. So this
No, that's not true. The whole district, Chief, needs to be looked at. You represent the entire DAFD.
I represent the entire district. Maybe I said that wrong. This is a computer model that simply shows if you got in your car at the fire station and drove, this is how far you can get. This doesn't represent where we go. Right? We go much farther than that in other responses to other communities. So this has nothing to do with what we actually do.
So do you want to explain the black line though, a little bit, so that they know what so this is
This black line,
the dotted line? Yep.
That is actually our response district in Dexter Township and Webster Township. Right? So we do from the state main station, we go all the way up into those areas on a routine basis. Those are our calls. All right? Everything outside of that, we would go mutual aid if we're called or automatic aid in some cases. So.
again, this is just, the chief says, it's a computer program that helps us develop a baseline comparison. It's really not totally accurate to the reality of what you do. It's just a way to compare geographic locations and give us some other data like housing potential and business potential that's reached. Yes?
I have a quick question for the council. All these other areas that we have a listing of that were potential, fire department, city, sheriff office, did you guys go into as detail as you did for the Main Street and the Nav properties? Lots of detail has been spent and time has been spent on those two properties. Did you look at all the other properties in such detail?
On the other properties for the fire station, we took like a footprint.
Yes, I saw the
Okay.
pictures of the
And then
other.
we looked to see, does it fit? So it was assumed to be the same cost in a different spot. And then we had discussions on whether we wanted to put it in residential neighborhood or, does that make sense? I mean, it's
It does.
a new station on this green site versus a new station on this green site were the same cost. So we looked at where was the available land, but ultimately concluded that it needs to be on a major street as opposed to in the
I just want to
residential.
hear some of your thought process because again, that vote occurred
Understood.
without everybody knowing what was going on. So we need some more background on how the decision was
I
made.
appreciate that. Happy to answer those questions.
Thank you.
Just to elaborate a little bit more, the test for fit we did was we used the footprint of the building, same building that we used on the MAV-D site, that 20,000-ish minus the sheriff, which was about 2,400 square feet. That's how we did the test for fit. So we were trying to do an apples to apples comparison on site. Will this same station work elsewhere? And then we did the response time, but that's the level of detail we did. Sorry, back on track here.
So, I have a question.
in the back.
I have one more question on the alternate sites. Why was the Dan Hoy location not?
So the Dan Hoy site was property the city purchased in 2008 or 2009, shortly after we completed our DPW building. That site sits at the furthest point south of the DAFD district, and it was viewed as too far away from responding to everything that was north. Okay, since then, council has, or city has made an agreement with DTE to swap the substation that's right outside the PNC Bank area. That substation's going away. We've swapped that property with a portion of the Dan Hoy property, so DTE can build a future substation there, closer to the industrial park, if they should need it in the future. The other half of that Dan Hoy property is under a agreement with Avalon Housing for 22 units of affordable housing.
So that property is effectively
So,
off the table.
yeah, to provide more context, yeah, Dan Hoy is off the table. but in 2014, when we started this, that was the site the city owned. And it was given as an exercise for possible new fire station location. It's just too far south.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, sir?
Is your building cost for 8140 Main Street, the remodel for that, is that taking into account the relocation of the fire department and the sheriff's office while you're doing the remodel?
No, but it is in the final tabulation, which I'll get to soon. So here's the standalone at Map D, separate parking for public, and this is what our goal was, to separate circulation area, separate parking covered for sheriff, staff parking for firefighting, and then apparatus access. So all of them are accommodated without commingling on the site. Yes, sir?
Just real quick to build on what Mr. Keough said, do I understand, Sean, that you're saying that the Dan Wood property is off the table at this point?
Yes.
So why are we even talking about that?
Again, it's just a matter of history. You may have more history on this entire topic than other members of the audience that have chosen to participate. So just bear with us. We were trying to show the history of that. This man, partisan architecture, and this man was tasked initially with looking at that site for us. When looking at that site, it became the basis for the footprint that we've used to kind of look around the rest of the sites as this thought process has expanded.
And I appreciate that. Are there any other sites that are no longer on the table that are in that list for any of either the police, fire, or the city hall?
Please keep in mind that the city only owns 8140. Okay, and we own property, what we commonly call 3045 Broad, which is right at Broad where the substation is in downtown. All of the other sites, we don't own that property. We would have to go out and purchase property. Okay, so some of the sites have been talked about and then sort of put aside because we didn't, like I said, either it was in a residential area or whatever, but we're showing you potential sites. If out of this process, everybody says, yeah, we think the fire station would be great there, or we'll go talk to that property owner. Or if you think it should stay where it is, tell us that at whatever cost. That's the kind of feedback we're looking for. But we're trying to show you the thought process. I realize it's jumbled, but this is 5 years summarized down into 30 slides. So appreciate your patience on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And it was 90 slides.
Oh, yeah, we're trying to get you home before the snow comes in.
It's not 5 years, it's been 20 years.
I think there's a hand up, David, maybe one more.
Yes, ma'am.
Just, to build on that a little bit, I trust that the city has hired a great partner and that you've done all your due diligence. I think for me, what's more important is to find out what is the one proposal that the fire department and the sheriff, and the sheriff's office and the city employees, they all put their weight behind, and you could show us what that proposal is, and we can give you feedback on it. I think this wealth of information is causing, for me, more confusion than insight. So I trust that you are brilliant and have done your job.
Well, thank you. Some days I'm not so sure, but I think we're working towards narrowing this down towards the end of this presentation. Again, as it's been said a couple times, we're trying to give you just a sense of how we got to today. Some of it's falling off to the side, but that question that you're asking, I think, is a question that needs to be answered. But I'm not going to provide that answer. I'm going to narrow it down for you. And a couple more slides, we'll get there. At least I hope. Here's the Copeland site, where we are right now. This was late in the process, and again, here we are with the new footprint, the updated program for the fire station needs, that roughly 20,200 square feet MAV D that included the sheriff. This is just the fire, and so that was 17,800, I believe, of that number, or 17,200. And we looked at a couple different versions. So on the board there, you'll see a standalone building, and in this one, again, trying to pair things together so there's some efficiency of common spaces. This is tying it to the existing building, so it's a lesser new build, but total square footage is met in terms of the program needed by the fire. And then it also uses the second level as city offices within this portion of the building, basically as it is, to continue its use of multi-purpose. So It also included site development, and this is a major part of this site being developed as parking, so we can also separate circulation patterns. So here's staff or fire, here's apparatus coming in that doesn't interfere with public or staff. And then here is the city hall area of the building, second floor version. The first floor would be fire services, and that would just link through a lobby that would be common back in the fire services. So we were trying to capitalize on some of the existing square footage, which is better value in terms of rebuilding it or repurposing it. So the cost reflects that a little bit in terms of savings. And that is $5,300,000, not including the cost of the property. And that's total project development cost. I don't have the cost separating the standalone versions. Yes, actually I do. No, I don't. But it would be slightly more. This seemed to be the way we were gravitating, so that's why that version was costed. Yes, ma'am?
I'm sorry, before I explode, I think that for people who have never been at these meetings before, or who have not looked at the votes by our city council has voted majority to not, you said you were going to spend 40 minutes on this thing. Our city council has voted, the majority of people on the council, to not put the new building, the new facilities down where they are. I mean, that has been the majority vote of our city council. They have sat here discreetly, but you know, that has not been what our city council has supported. And I think that having spent over an hour on something that is not supported by the majority of our city council doesn't make any sense.
So I'll add that if you didn't publicly disclose that meeting and you took that vote, I don't think the community has had an opportunity.
It was publicly.
No, it wasn't, because if you look back at the agenda and what was publicly disclosed as to what vote would be voted on that evening, it was not on that agenda. So that's the point I'm trying to make. And in terms of, you know, you're only an election away from changing that vote. So you could have another vote, and then you have to vote to pay for this thing here too. So I think it's a great opportunity now to hear all the options and have the community know what those things are before a vote was taken. And a vote.
This was not a secret vote. This has been going on for years.
Hold on. Let me reestablish control for just, or try to here. So, as a 7-member body, we have had meetings, workshops monthly for the last 14 months as we've been working. Mary Ellen, please, we've been working. We all had a chance during those meetings to say what went into the presentation that you're seeing today. And we all left the last several meetings with this as the agreed upon presentation. So please let us just present the information. We felt it was important to give you the background. The statements Pete's making are true. Okay? Your comment is also true. There was a vote.
Yes, and for many years we have been voting.
And we're trying to validate that. Okay? So we're looking for your input. What is it that you've heard that you like? What is it that you've heard that you don't like? What is it that you've heard that doesn't make any sense? Please tell us. We need your help in that. And then we're going to evaluate that so that we can move forward. But we need to have the important step of allowing the public to understand all the thought and the discussion that's gone into it. So, plus the 40 minutes that we advertised was if there were no questions. We chose to take the questions, and those are obviously added time. But I think it's healthy time. I think there's a good discussion going on here.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
It isn't time now for that. We gotta do this first, then ask the question.
Yes.
Because like the lady pointed out,
20 minutes.
We're almost
you know
there.
I'm correct. We've been over this many, many times. Right?
Some have heard it, some have heard it, some have
Why don't you
not.
let the people ask the questions? When are we gonna do that?
We're almost there.
I'm almost to the finish line.
Pardon?
I'm almost to
We're
the
almost
finish
there.
line.
Thank you.
Sorry about being more than 40 minutes, but I will be as efficient in finishing as I can. So these next 3 slides, or 4 slides, are the comparison in a nutshell of giving you a graphic. Here's the version, here's the items included, city, sheriff, fire, parking or not. And then some bullet point of what's the main characteristics of it and the price. So there's a kind of a Reader's Digest version of the first 30 slides of what are these versions including and what do they cost. I'm not going to go through them any more than I just did. Here's the summary sheet, which is basically a final consideration. Doesn't include all the versions that we just went through. It talks about scenarios of consideration, which I know that you're not going to be able to see them from, well, things are getting better.
Yeah, better, some days worse.
But I'll read through them as clearly as I can. I'll go to the next slide, which is...
Actually, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Can we, I think what would be helpful is, I think I misspoke earlier, I realize city council made a 4-3 vote, but I guess I'm concerned, what I'm interested in is, you eliminated 8140 Main by virtue of that vote. And so why, what was considered the deciding factors in your conversation, and 2 or 3 bullet points of why it was eliminated in favor of the mass property? So from purely from structure, cost, service, what stuck out to you to have that vote so that it goes? Because it seems...
Yeah, I'll take a...
Before you answer, can I just throw out my 10-second summary? So initially, the mayor said what we're going to try to talk about is the need, the location, and the cost.
Right.
We established the need, and we didn't go into a lot of detail, but the need is overwhelming. You need to do something. You can't keep the status quo. In my opinion, very least is asset preservation. So there's cost involved in that. We've outlined the cost in our report, which isn't here today, but there is a report that says if you do nothing, just repair, it costs this. But for these new versions, we've included cost for various locations. So the 3 things, need, cost, location, 2 of them are nailed down.
Yeah.
The 3rd one is location. And I think that's maybe part of the answer to the question you just asked. So I'm going to back away and let that be the discussion.
Howdy. So I'm going to start by saying if this had been an easy thing, it would have been done 20 years ago when I was an undergraduate student and I still had hair on my head and had to worry about going to a barber. It's tricky because we're a relatively tight community and the structure of the fire organization, it's an area-wide, but each community is responsible for its own. A couple of concerns why I do not want it at 8140 is just quick show of hands. How many people think that the 2 stations are an apples-to-apples comparison in terms of function? At the addition at the current station versus a new one at MAV site. Who thinks, based on presentation, that they're essentially the same?
Well, yeah, a new one, sure. A renovated one.
Okay, well, so the term that keeps coming up in my mind is doing something at 8140, that's a Franken station. I cannot anywhere find a fire station where you've got apparatus bay that are at 90 degrees, so if one truck's coming out, it blocks another one. I've spoken with someone, actually probably 5 or 6 of you have spent many hours with on this, is my general philosophy is I want to do something right the first time and not keep doing it or keep having to add on and add on and add on. So the 3.8 million for the Franken station, it doesn't have the training room. It doesn't have
that what
anything.
you're saying is very offensive.
Yeah, I was just...
It is very offensive. Because there are people, there are constituents, which are yours, that do not think it's a Franken station. And so that's your opinion, and that's okay. But please, it's...
Okay, I'm happy for other terms. So it's not a complete station. It doesn't have all the things we need when we turn the lights on. And making it function as a modern station is going to be more than 3.8 million. And it does not include any room for any expansion in the future, so if we decide to go to a full-time department, we got no room to do that there. We're going to have to look for another place. There's no room for outdoor training there. When they come in after a run, they're still gonna have to park the trucks out in the street. I don't think that's good. Having 2 hot zones means we're gonna have to supply equipment in 2 places to support the trucks. It just doesn't work.
What do you mean by 2 hot zones?
Hot zones are, and the firefighters here can talk to that better than I can, but the bays are the hot zones. That's where you have all the contaminants, all the nasty things. You want to keep it separated from where the people are living. And the station, the addition work, there's a lot of commingling. You can't actually get from one bay to the other bay without going through living space. So either you're going to have double equipment to support it, or you're going to be carrying stuff through that zone, or you're going to be walking around outside with stuff. And as the mayor said, people should have a good environment to work. Having to work around stuff and make it doesn't fit with me. I want to get it done right, get it done once, so it's set up for decades, not 10 years.
So it was determined the 8140 Main, the most expensive scenario, whatever A3 or B3, 7.3 million, would not, it's not not apples to apples, so it would not be able to service.
No, the A and the B, my understandings were developed before our needs assessment was done. So there's, are they? Okay.
They were developed with a different fire program. The program changed or was revised.
So a lot of the A's don't have 5 bays, right? Some of them have as little as 3.
On Main Street, none do, but as a total, the station has 5 bays. But it's park level, which obviously has a compromise to it.
We're going to answer these questions first.
Yes?
So I was just going to say, I think if I can try to summarize sort of a lot of emotions going on in here right now, and pardon me if I do this inappropriately or wrong, don't capture your opinion, but I think we're all looking at overall cost. My first question is, where is all the funding for this going to come from? Are there any reserves of money right now that are already allocated to build out city offices, fire department, sheriff station? Or is all of this going to have to be generated as new money? That's my first question.
The answer is no. The answer is it would have to be generated as new money. We have about $300,000 saved right now. So as I mentioned in the overview, we would have to have a new tax.
Great. Okay. So as we're looking at, we have 3 things to accommodate. We have fire department, which we all agree, I think we can agree the current fire department does not serve as it needs to. And it sounds like the existing space, even renovated, is probably not going to be what our growing community might need for the future. We do have 2 substations, right? We have the new one that Webster's going to be building, and we have the territorial. I would like to sort of know, and maybe this isn't the time to do it, but how those interplay into the city. You said, Fire Chief, whenever there's a call, we go to everything. Does everybody go to everything? The other 2 substations, if they're staffed, does everyone report? Okay, so looking at one of the charts, and you said the current fire department Dexter services, about 30% of its runs are within the city of Dexter itself. The other 70% are outside of that. If this is going to be funded, is it going to be funded by Webster Township, Dexter Township too, or is it going to be funded purely by the city of Dexter?
City of Dexter.
So if you're looking to the city of Dexter to fund a new building, and the map property, that's a big space. I mean, driving by, you see how big that is. If we want to build a fire station that can accommodate the future out there, I have a couple of questions. Number 1, why are the city offices not encompassed in that? That's a big space. It had a lot of parking. Could we use some of that space, or some of that parking space, to accomplish the 3rd goal, which is new city offices? And then B, why is that building so much money? When I hear Webster Township is building granted it's probably smaller, and that is nice, but a substation, fire station for 2.8 that can service companies. Why are we looking at $6.6 million plus $600,000 in property purchase? So if we're going to, if the consensus is to go to MAV and build something that's going to grow for the future, can we do it in a maybe more fiscally reduced amount? And can we do it so it includes city offices, so it keeps all 3 properties, all 3 entities are getting what they need? Yeah.
You want me to give a shot of that? I'll try to
Allison, why don't you come up here? Well, no, as opposed to Zach,
So I think there's an add-on, because I missed something here, so.
as opposed to Zach, I have here, but I've been, after dealing with this 20 years, I don't know why, okay? So, I was on the city council when we first had this discussion about fire hall in 1998, and we haven't solved the problem yet. It's 21 years now, okay? As Zach said, it was easy, we'd done it a long time ago. To answer the question about why we have made the decisions, we should go back, and we also had a committee, more recent committee, that was made up of 3 council members and a DDA person, okay? 4 council people, and a DDA person. The mayor, myself, Jim Carson, Jim Smith here, and at that time we had Fred Schmidt, who was in the audience here, and he was from the DDA. That vote every time, we had a 4-to-1 vote, multiple times, to eliminate 8140, for the variety of reasons that we've already had, some of the variety of reasons we have there. We also saw some other advantages. Let's talk about the city hall. There has been a goal, a fairly strong goal, that the city hall should be in the downtown area. Now, we had an opportunity to have this done 10 years ago when the library sold their site. And it was voted 5-2 to have that site be used, and then it was reversed and was changed. And we lost that site. That site was $285,000. It was almost 4,000 square feet. It would have cost us about $150,000 renovated for less than $500,000. We could have had a city hall right now at the old library site for $500,000. But we chose not to do that. So we've suffered some of that since that time. So what did that do? It focused all the time for the city site to be downtown. So there's your answer. Why we did. And we've had that discussion. Could we have it out there? People have said, including our development director, they prefer not that to happen, okay? They would have it downtown. Second thing, when we looked at the site that we presently have, we thought that there were deficiencies in that site, as Zach has already. I have 2 documents here. One letter from the chief and a 2-page letter listed all the reasons, 2 pages, single space here, talking about the reasons that he feels that that site is not adequate in the future, as well as now. And his, not putting words in his mouth, he'll say this: the minute we'd get that built, we'd have to start correcting the same problems, or problems that we already have right now. And that the site doesn't solve the problem. The site is less than an acre of land. This is 2.5 acres, including the parking lot. Okay? The third reason that some of us feel that strongly is that when I went to the sheriff's department today, to the fire hall, and during the tour, there were 5 sheriff's cars parked there. Now that's where they're parked most of the time, because they come and get them and then they use them and move them out. But that's 5 parking spaces that could be used, and also the parking spaces for all the firemen. When they go there, they have to park somewhere as well. Sometimes on site, sometimes off site. When there's a fire, of course, if you've been there, the cars are parked everywhere. When they have a training, they're parked everywhere. That takes space of businesses and for the trail that we think could be done better. So we think that that's a possibility, that if we eliminate those 2 things there, we'd have more trailhead parking and more parking. We believe, some of us believe, that we could actually add 50 parking spaces to that site and still have a site for the city hall right there. We own the property. Where in the city do we own space for 50 parking spaces that we could put in? I'm not talking about a structure, I'm talking about on-surface parking that would serve the city, contiguous to the business district, and also contiguous to the trail system. And the trail system, as you know, is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, not smaller and smaller and smaller. Not going to stay the same. So for those reasons, we felt that it was important to find another site. When you look at it, I've got a map here, right here, that shows all the sites that we looked at, every site that we looked at. You can't see it, but right there, I think I counted 22 of them that we looked at for various places. We've done this for years.
We cut some of the slides.
Yeah. And we told David he couldn't talk about all of them, okay? So we got down to 2 sites. It's either 8140, and some of us believe it's not adequate, and solve some other problems. We also felt strongly that we should have public bathrooms down there, somewhere in the city, okay? That's an excellent site for us. It's contiguous to our park system, it's contiguous to the border trail, and it's contiguous to downtown. If you're in a bathroom today, you have to walk, in a handicapper, you have to walk across Main Street, down around the Serpentine Trail, go underneath the bridge, and come back to the porta potties that we have there. If you do that, reverse that, you have to go the same way to get back to your original site. That's why we discussed elevators up and down to allow people to be transferred back and forth. Then we can build that in the sites when we build the city hall there. So for those reasons, we were looking at multiple things rather than just one or 2, and trying to make the differences there. Now, we can still do that, but the question is, of course, the cost. It's going to cost more. I'm not going to argue that at all. When I first came back into the city, I lived here for 4 years, moved out, came back in the mid-'80s, we used to have a major discussion on one issue, and that was, we're going to build an industrial park. I can tell you, there was a lot of people who didn't want us to build an industrial park. People fought it. That's the best thing that ever happened to the city. The tax dollars there, Paul Bishop left, but he should be praised for all his effort that he did to get that going. It built our water tower, it built our water system, and we have the biggest taxpayers in that part of that fund our programs that we have in the city here, by far. That's a very important thing. I was involved as a business person when we decided to have the downtown development and the streetscape. It took us 3 votes, folks, to get that done. We finally tweaked it and got it done. Is there anybody that didn't think at least that's a good thing that we did for the city? We had to fight hard to do that. The business people as well as that. I can tell you what I got out as a business person. I got a street light in front of my business. That's all I got. But guess what? I was the one that went there to the second meeting after I voted down the second time and said we have to go back. And we did. We tweaked it all. We tweaked the process. Let's talk about the dam in the park. When we had the dam, when we talked about taking the dam out, there were meetings, people that didn't want that done either. They had these past histories of what they did on that space. And they said it would be a muddy mess. We couldn't even it would be sticky and everything else. For months they claimed. You could walk out of there over that space in 2 weeks. And you see what we have today. So when I look at what I have seen in this city and what we've done, I look at this and say, I want, as Zach has mentioned, a city hall, downtown if possible, but a fire hall that's going to be big enough, expandable in the future. We can do that on the Mav site. We can't do that on that site that we have presently there. And as I see, and have been told by many people, if I had a choice to build a fire hall, it would never be at that site, where 2 times a day we have the most traffic that we ever have at one space in the city. Those are some of the reasons that I believe strongly that it should be moved, and it should be there. Now, that does not equate with some of my friends that live in that area. I get that. But I'll challenge you, find another space. I've had people say, just go down to Central Street and buy and just take over 5 houses down there. Well, I got friends that are in this audience that live on Central Street. And guess what? If you did that, those people that live next to them wouldn't be happy with a fire hall there, okay? So I think we are locked into 2 options here. One or the other. I will not even get into the argument of how the vote took and how it happened. They happened to come out of 2 work sessions, by the way, that we had, and that vote of 4-3. But it wasn't a surprise from what the previous committee minutes had, and those minutes were all public record. People have voted on that before, 4-1.
I think
there's a hand up there.
Yes, I have a question for the fire chief, please. I'm a resident of Eaton Court, which is directly behind Mav, where they're talking about building this. I want to know how many runs you do a day and how noisy that's going to be for me that lives there.
I don't believe that the impact of noise is going to be
Gosh,
much
we can
more
hear
than
the sirens going right down Ann Arbor Dexter Road all the time. How can you say that?
And those are the same sirens you'll hear if it's built there. It's not, our run numbers are not going to increase just because we
on
do
the
this.
Mav site though, It makes no sense. It's putting away from downtown. You're gonna be pushing those trucks. 70% of the runs are gonna have to go down through downtown.
Out to
And
those areas, yeah.
you talked about outdoor training. That's not gonna work in a residential section. And it's a fire department station can be hazardous by nature. You got tanks, it is right next to a daycare center that's almost ready to open. It just doesn't make any sense to use that property for a fire station.
When I get an opportunity to speak, I can talk to all of those, and I believe I'm going to be given some time.
You can answer the questions I have.
Really, those are not valid arguments. The daycare center, we got more kids right now running through our station, in our station, and around our station than I'll ever have from that daycare center. As far as responding through town to go to the townships, you're absolutely right. We're going to have to go through the town. But the bottom line here is when looking at the various sites, we have to have at least 2.5 acres to be able to train, to be able to move our trucks around outside, to be able to take care of our trucks. If you've ever seen us after a run now, when we're trying to clean up equipment, we actually park our trucks up on Main Street or on Main Street or on Alpine Street while we're cleaning other trucks. So it's a traffic hazard. We need to have some open space around. It's not just the footprint of the building. I mean, it's what we're doing in and around the building. We also, when we respond, we have to have parking spaces for our paid-on-call folks. They need to be able to get in. If you want to see how bad it is where it's at right now, and it will get worse if we build a station there because you're talking about building a larger building on that same site. But go there on a Monday night when we're training. Cars are parked 4 and 5 deep and trying to move around.
You didn't really answer my question either. How many runs do you average a day?
May I speak?
4 to 5 runs a day.
I'd like to say I live on Alpine Street as close to the current station as you do on Eaton Court, and they do not disturb us.
Okay. That's good to know.
Chief, I have a question about operations. If 8140 was selected as the site, how would you serve our community during the construction process?
Well, as David mentioned, that has not even been calculated out yet, and this isn't my first rodeo with this. If you're going to remodel this station to the extent that we are and build it, you're going to have to purchase the MAP site anyway, or some other site, to build a temporary fire station for us to move to. I mean, there's no way around it. If you want to keep fire trucks in the city, and I can't put them at the 2 township stations. I don't have the bunk room space and I don't have the bay space to move everything out to those stations. So somewhere in the city, we're going to have to find a spot to relocate for about a year while this project is underway, and those costs haven't even been put in there.
But to the original question, there are open areas like Country Market that could be looked at as temporary spots. And we haven't gotten that far down the road in any of this, as you can see. It's very conceptual.
And my experience of the temporary fire station, you're talking about $500,000 to $700,000 just to do that.
So my question is, I think we need new city hall, new fire, and new sheriff substation. No doubt about that. My whole concern is how this is getting paid for. I'm also speaking for my husband, who's a police officer, who's working there. My biggest concern is I don't want the city footing the whole bill. So he called and talked to Saline and Brighton, I believe, who are also fire districts. And there's different ways to fund stuff. You know, maybe the city pays for the initial, and then we get payments from the fire district for upkeep and feeding of the whole thing. Why is it all falling on the city?
Sure. The current interlocal agreement was formed under Public Act 7 in Michigan, where the 3 municipalities agreed to provide a fire department. Within that act, each of the municipalities agreed to build their own or maintain their own fire station. So Dexter Township, when they built their station, they did it with all Dexter Township money. None of it came out of DAFD fire department money. None of it was city money. Webster Township's the same way. They're going to be building their station and they're going to fund that station themselves. So the city's not going to be on the hook for any of that. And so because of that agreement, the city does have to do their own station and fund it. One of the other issues with this is what the question was, why is their station in Webster 2.8 and the city station is higher? Part of that is that part of the interlocal agreement, the comment that's in there, the provision is in there, is that the headquarters station will be in the city of Dexter. Well, the headquarters station is where all the offices are, the main training facilities. It is where the majority of the equipment is. And so it is going to be inherently larger station than the other two. And I have no control over that. That's the agreement that's in place right now.
That the city, because we're the biggest one, we have to house everything for the fire,
Correct.
for the fire area.
Because it's the headquarters
Yes,
station.
it is.
Right?
And regarding the cost that was mentioned earlier, it's less than 3 times more than Webster's, but it's 3 times as large.
Yeah, I know
So
that.
it's dollars to dollars is about the same thing, it's just bigger.
It started, the Dexter area fire department started as the Dexter Fire Department.
Yes.
Okay, and then has expanded out.
Yeah.
When that agreement was put in place, you know, the pride of starting that, we wanted the main station to stay. The word is main, not headquarters. In the agreement, it says the main station will be in the city, and it's not defined what has to be at the main station. I think it was put in there with from the perspective of, historically, if you go back years and years and years, it's always been in Dexter, and we didn't want to lose that
So that's
in
legal,
expanding.
it's not like, oh, it's nice to have it that way, it's a legal requirement?
It's not a legal requirement.
It is. It is.
It's part of the agreement.
But if the chief, for example, were to say, I want to have a smaller station in the city, but still have my office there, that could work too. It's all in how he decides to do the deployment.
Here?
But the two townships are not obligated in any way to pay for the city's facility that we choose to have in the city. That's a city cost.
Right, as a city resident, it's just.
Unless they want to be generous, John, unless you have some extra costs.
It's frustrating to have to foot the bill for something that we don't get the majority of the calls on, and I know it's been nice to be the main, but do we have to be, just because we don't have
Well,
the calls?
and that's why
frustrating.
that's why we've tried to look at and present options that are not the most expensive as building a new station. Because from a service perspective, and I'm the no vote on the facility committee, okay? If anyone wants to know, the 4-1, I think we could provide the same high-quality service from the same station for much less cost. Okay, and I think that that's what most residents want, but then again, I'm asking you, tell me if that's not the case.
Mayor, you said at the very beginning it may cost 2 to 3 mills. Translate, what is it?
So our tax base, if everybody pays 1 mil, it generates about $225,000, I think 223. This year, $223,000 in tax revenue. So on this sheet, we've got different scenarios. If you took the highest one and we bonded to pay $10 million, let's just say, which is the combination of building a new fire station and the new city offices, over the life of a 20-year bond, $10 million in principal, you're going to pay back approximately $14.2 or $14.5 million. It all depends on the exact interest rate and the terms there, but you're going to pay some interest. So if you divide 14 million by 20 years, that's roughly $700,000. So 700,000 divided by the number of mills it would take to pay that bond payment, 223 into 7 is like 3.5 mills.
Well, I'm sorry, what does that cost me as the homeowner?
Right.
What's a mill?
So 1 mil means $1 for every $1,000 of taxable value. So for every $100,000 your home is valued at, it costs you an extra $223. So if we had to spend 3 mills a year to do it, it's an extra $669 or $700 an average. That's if you have a $200,000, you know what I mean, $100,000 in taxable value.
And you should also realize that.
And there are, let me just finish real quick, I'll let you. So I've heard from people that can't afford that. You know, we're a pretty lucky community, but we still have a big chunk of our community that does not make $50,000 a year. And we know that, the demographics, okay? We just saw Zach raise his hand. So we're trying to be respectful of this cost issue because there are some that can, maybe $700 extra a year is nothing. We wouldn't even blink an eye at it. But there are some that means a lot. And to that point, I think that the most efficient way to do it is what we should be looking at. And from the comments of the gentleman in the blue shirt with the response time, our district is to the north.
So why make the runs longer? Why make 70% of the runs longer and pay more to do it? But that's,
So I think we heard a good representation of the 4 vote, and it was 4-3. So it was very close. It wasn't a unanimous vote of city council. So, Mayor Keough just said any other points. Are there any other points of the 3 dissenting votes of why? Because clearly you had, as part of your information, the letters from the chief and all of these costs and all of these things. So what provided you, if you were a dissenting vote, to think that maybe the math property shouldn't have been the right property or should stay within consideration? Okay.
I'll defer and I'll speak later, okay, about that. I'll let Donna and Sean, you've heard from him. Scott is a new representative, just was appointed a few months ago, so he's stuck in the middle right here with this decision, okay? So, but Donna can speak, and I'll speak later.
Well, thank you, Paul.
do you want to go ahead, Donna? Do you want to talk?
Sure.
Go ahead, please.
As the one of the people, it was not on the agenda. It was something that came up just like that. That always bothers me. I've been in office here since '82, I think it is. And the one thing that I always go for is let's do it the same for everybody. Let's be fair. When I look at the cost of all these things, I would love to maybe have stainless steel in my remodeled kitchen, but if my budget says I get an old white porcelain and it does the job, then that's probably what I'm going to have to live with. And I think a lot of people might want to get a bigger home. They start with a small home and they may want to change to a larger home and so on. But you got to do what you can do in terms of what you can afford and what your budget is. And to me, this affects our bonding power, our borrowing power. I just think that it is too much money. So that's my concern.
I guess we'll start. You had your hand, the firefighter had to.
Just real quick question, has there been any projections or thought into how much money to be brought in from taxes on Grandview Commons, Jeffords, and some of these other larger scale projects? What's the city bringing in monetarily from that might offset some of these costs?
So the Grandview project is an important one, and that is within our DDA district. So the taxes that are captured by, the majority of the taxes, the incremental taxes that are captured there stay within the DDA, and the DDA cannot use those funds for new buildings. So while it's a really good thing for the city, it's going to add people, it's going to add tap fees and water usage, to help support our water and sewer systems. The incremental tax benefit of those properties at Grandview will be used by the DDA to fund infrastructure improvements throughout the DDA. And we have a big DDA. It goes down Dexter and Arbor Road all the way to past the LaFontaine Chevrolet dealership. It's our downtown. It's down Baker Road. So those funds will be helpful, but not towards facility improvements.
So a fire station won't be considered as infrastructure?
No.
Okay.
Yep. Although what it does do is the increase in the taxable value base for the city means that we have more room for bonding than we did before those projects were done. And because those funds are going to the DDA, all the capture for the increased value is going just to the DDA. So we're not sharing it with the schools or the library. We're kind of jerks like that, but that's how Michigan set it up. It means that the city has been loaning money to the DDA for a number of years because they haven't had much money. So the DDA will be able to pay those funds back to the city's general fund that we can use for other stuff. And other things the city has been paying for instead of the DDA will alleviate some of that pressure.
Questions, a lot of hands.
The act that requires the main office to be in the city, that was done when you were a township or a village. And the tax structure has changed, hasn't it? And it requires more.
It's not an act. I mean, this is an agreement between 3 parties, very simply done under Public Act 7. But I can show you the sentence. All it says is the main station shall stay in the village of Dexter, or something to that effect.
But at that time, when there was a village, wasn't taxes partly paid to the township and the city?
Yes, we also paid. If you were a resident in Scioto Township, you paid Scioto Township taxes. If you were a portion of the resident that lived in Webster Township, you would have paid to Webster Township. There was another layer of taxation that has gone away now that we're a city.
And Scioto Township at one time was in the
Interlocal.
EFD. the
Right,
interlocal,
I
okay,
understand.
now
that.
they're not.
I'm quite aware of that, but I just wondered the tax burden, now that we're a city, increases our responsibility for the main fire station.
I'm not sure if it does or not. The responsibility to pay for the costs of our station have been that way since the agreement was formed. If we choose to have a station, those are our costs, just like John illustrated in Dexter Township, they paid for their station, and Webster Township's going to pay for their station. Right behind you.
I would like to hear what the rationale was for not giving the Adair printing property more consideration, given its location north and off of the busy.
So I used Adair as a reference. We were actually looking at the vacant property next to Adair at the time that we looked at that. Okay, we weren't looking to buy the Adair property. We were looking at the vacant property that has a little blue house on it, if you will, if you can picture it, right in front of the Dexter, the Detroit Edison substation.
Mrs. Crocker's house, that way up some.
Mrs.
Crocker's house.
Mrs. Crocker's house.
Was it ruled out of consideration?
Well, my recollection is we contacted the property owner who owns it now, and I believe he wanted approximately $400,000. I can look that number up. He wanted approximately $400,000, and then the general discussion was it's more closely tied to a residential neighborhood, and the access way out of there for the trucks would be Second, Hudson, Edison, and those roads weren't, well, Second Street is one of our major streets technically, even though it's not advertised. Those arteries for the station, for the trucks to leave, were not viewed as the best choices by our discussion.
Another concern with that site is with the substation right behind it, there's a lot of copper wires wound up, and that makes it difficult to send and receive radio signals. I know the station at Dexter Township, right next to the Cala substation, they have problems sending signals out to the northwest. So they're actually having to look at setting up a relay somewhere else in order to communicate to that side.
So that's a new point that I've not heard in 6 years, but it's a great new point. Okay, so see, this is real time. This is why this looks like this. We're doing, let me keep going on questions while we're in this period. Up here in the second row, please.
Well, I want to say that I'm in full support of needing a new facility of some sort or a major upgrade to the existing one. I don't support putting it on the MAV property. I think increasing the response times is a dangerous thing to do. I have over 20 years of full-time firefighting experience, and I just don't think that that's a good decision. I think the greater need needs to be looked at, and that would be staffing these fire stations. And if you go ahead and build a $7 million fire station, I have a hard time believing people are going to want to turn around and fork over more money to staff, increase the staffing in the future. And you're going to a fire with 3 people, which is nowhere near enough. You can't even make an interior attack with 3 people. And I think that stuff really needs to be looked at.
Thank you.
A lot more thought needs to go into this.
Just relative to that point, and the chief can help me here, we do have 3 people full-time on staff in our fire department.
Yeah.
2 in the main station, 1 out in Dexter Township. We are working towards that 4th person once the Webster Township station is open for that. So that's on the horizon, and all 3 of those communities are working their budgets to plan for that in advance. So we're trying to get to that 4th person.
So there's, if I may, there's balances to be had throughout. And, you know, when we put this project together is I don't expect everybody to have the knowledge or the background, and obviously you have some, but you know, these plans that we're putting together, David mentioned using the Uniform Facility Code. We also use FEMA or DHS Circular 68 for fire stations. It talks about what you need for sizes and spaces and things of that nature, including how big a lot you need for the fire station. And we're looking at, no matter where we go, we probably need about 2.5 acres in order to site this building on. So many of the sites were eliminated just because they weren't big enough. Unfortunately for the city of Dexter, one of the things, the balances that come in here is, we talk about response times, yeah, some are going to be a little longer if we move it, but some are going to be a little less. And so we try to look at that response time bubble and see, you know, what makes the most sense. One of the limitations that Dexter City has is you're not a big city, and you don't have a lot of open space. And truly, there's one spot left in the city that's 2.5 acres. And that's why the MAF site kind of gets focused on a little bit, is because it does meet the needs of not just in the station, but around the station to be able to do the things that we need to do. Outside of that site, I think that if we start looking at other sites, we've talked about buying houses or eminent domain or things like that. If you want to find the perfect site to be able to get the perfect response times, there's going to be other people in here that are going to say, whoa, wait a minute, that don't work. Okay, so there's balances and trade-offs there, and ultimately coming to the MAF site is my recommendation of where to go, taking all of those into consideration. I've been doing this a long time. I got 40 years in the fire service. This is my 6th fire station I've worked on, and I want to take a moment and commend the board. Every fire station I've ever worked on, we've been in the same thing, the same process. It's not easy. It's a lot of money. We want to set you up for success in the future. Part of the reason for pushing towards the MAF site from my perspective, rather than the 8140, a huge piece is the site itself. There's no room, there's traffic issues, there's problems with that. When we look at remodeling the building, I want to set you up for long-term success. I want a 40 to 50-year building for you folks. As I talked about the FA circular and the requirements that are needed for a fire station, I don't believe that the current proposal of what they're going to do to modify that fire station gets us in a good position where we won't be saying, hey, we've spent $4 million, we've remodeled this building, and then as a fire chief and your risk manager, I understand, I'm saying, yeah, but what about this? All right, now we got to fix this. As was mentioned, there's not a classroom in there, there's no fitness room. There's a litany of things that I could talk about, but I won't. But the fact is, I don't want to set you up for a situation where you spent $6 million, and I think that remodel is closer to $6 million, and then you're going to be standing up and saying, now what are we going to do about fixing the fire station we just built? Let's do it at the MAF site. Let's do it right. Let's get you the station you need for the long-term future. Yes, there may be some issues with response times a little bit, but I don't believe that they're significant.
So you're saying there may be or there will be? I would argue there will be.
I will go with this.
2 minutes.
We're undergoing right now a staffing study.
It's a huge issue when you're in the fire.
It's not that big. It's nowhere near that big.
Response time is not a big issue?
No, it's nowhere near as 2-minute difference, all right? So we're undergoing a staffing study right now through Emergency Services Consulting, and one of the things that they're looking at is the difference between our current site and the MAF site. And all I have is draft documents, so I can't release them right now, but their indication over a 2-year time, they analyzed all the runs that we had, and they used HVA CAD data, and there would have been, over a 2-year time cycle, only 18 runs that would have been different from meeting our 4-minute response time. So moving from the one site to the other here isn't going to impact our operations, it'll actually enhance our operations.
So there's a lot of things that have been said there that we haven't seen. We don't know what that report says yet. Obviously, we'll share it when we get it. Okay, I think that is one of the questions we're asking you to think about as a body, is the response time. You live in the community. You know physically where these 2 sites are that we're talking about. Okay, now, as I look around the world, there are many stations that don't sit on 2.5 acres. Including Washtenaw County. Okay, so that number is a number. But I think if you drive around and look, you can see there's a lot of stations that are on much less property than that. But response time is huge to me. I want to go to the person behind Marnie, because Karen, I think you've had your hand up more than one time. I want to make sure everybody who hasn't spoken gets a chance to speak. Karen, please.
Okay, it's a quick question, and it's I don't know if this is helpful or not. I thought Paul painted an attractive picture of what to use the current site for going forward, and that site will use. If that were sold instead, would that have generated any revenue, enough revenue to make a difference in the funding of all this? It's just a partial funding source.
The answer to that is yes, it could be sold. Then the second question that comes out of that is, where do we put the city hall?
Well, I appreciate that.
Okay. But there, and where do we have a site?
So that we'll take comments on that. If you think that 8140 should be sold for another use, write that down. Okay, that's, you know, we're open to feedback on anything.
We discussed it.
But we haven't, well, we haven't discussed with any seriousness because we have a fire station there and no spot, you know, to move it right now. So it's not like it's on the market to be sold. But if you think that's the long-term vision, I'd be interested in hearing that. But I don't know how many of those comments we get. Who else had their hand? Let me just keep, then I'll come back to you. Right in the middle, Chet, and then the lady behind you.
Has the property across the water from the current site been considered?
That was my question also.
The property across the water, where the old Mill Creek Sporting Goods lived at?
Yes.
How would that relate, basically, or could it? Not that it could necessarily accommodate one or the other, but could it help with,
Could it be included?
parking or whatever?
It certainly could help with parking. I mean, it's close proximity, right? I believe the price on that property is around
$650,000.
$650,000, our real estate agent on the board here. So we have not looked at it as like moving the station there or putting something there. City Hall.
Or park.
Okay, and again, that property is just a year and a half physically in the city. It was just annexed, and previously for a different purpose. There was a proposal there that fell through. So that if you think we should investigate that idea, we'd be happy to look at it. We do know that one of the biggest challenges with that site is the driveway is directly across from that intersection at Dexter Chelsea. So from the perspective of, you know, right now on Main Street, you know, they can get out, they got a big driveway, and go in many different directions, but that moves it closer to a pinch point. Who else? Back? Jason?
Sean, do we have an approximate value of what 8140 would be worth on the market?
We do not.
It's not like that.
Not, at least I don't believe we do, right? No. We do not. We do not. Allison?
Okay, so I keep bringing it back to money. What do I do? If the Webster substation is going to be Webster station is going to be $2.8 million, and I realize we need to have by this contract that's out there the bigger hub and have a meeting station and have other things, and it needs to be bigger and probably have more trucks.
We don't need to have the meetings at that station. The chief could choose to do the training at the Dexter Township station.
So my question is, can we build a MAV property station that accommodates fire and sheriff for less than $6.6 million? Can we build it for $4 million? No?
We haven't seen that yet.
There is value engineering to be done, and you'll realize a significant savings in that process. What the number is, we only kind of did the middle of the road. To go less, you can save money.
So I think we all want to spend money wisely and not invest in something that's not going to work for the future. While I do love having the idea of the fire station downtown because it adds to the quaintness of Dexter, I love the idea of an elevator, making it more accessible to the park for people to go down and enjoy that. I like the streetscape idea of that. I don't think any of us want to spend money that's not going to work for future needs. I think one of the concerns is, and I know the people I've spoken to, is the price tag of that MAV property as it's being presented right now. That's a lot of money, especially when I hear that another area with essentially the same cost to build per square foot is doing it for less than half of what is being proposed here. That's a really big financial chunk to swallow as a village person or city person who's going to be putting 100% of the bill for this.
You have to realize it's a difference, Allison, in the farming community that they live in and the price of that, and they own that property. We didn't own the property here.
So I'm not putting the cost of the property in, that's the $600,000 on top of the $6.6 million to build it. So I'm trying to compare building cost to building cost.
Gotcha.
But it's one-third the size also.
Donna wanted to speak here.
I also want you to consider that if you put the fire hall out on that property, it will not be on the tax roll. So if it gets developed and MAV develops it, you'll get revenue from that. If you move the fire hall out there, you will not do that.
Phil, we haven't heard from you yet.
Yeah, and to that point, I'm kind of curious because if you do buy the MAV, I think the idea of selling the downtown spot would be ideal. but I seem like I hear everybody assuming that the city offices should be downtown. I don't understand why that's a priority. And I'm curious as to why it seems like the entire city council believes that that's a priority. You all have said that you prefer to be downtown.
We prefer to be downtown.
So why is
But it's
that a
not-
priority?
It's not, well, because I think that's where most city offices are, in the center of your particular small units of government, they have them in the center of town. Now,
But we
where
already said that the DDA extends all the way out to the MAV property, right?
Could be anywhere.
So
Could be
that
anywhere.
DDA, I mean, that to me, that
I
kind
get
of
it.
is considered
So-
part of the downtown area.
So I can speak to that. In general, so everyone think back to Briarwood Mall. You've got the anchor stores on the ends. And the idea is the anchors, they draw people in and you go see the other stores. Public buildings like libraries, post office, and city offices kind of serve as those civic anchors that help bring people downtown. You go pay your tax bill you want, or you get some donuts and that type of stuff. So in general, there is, if possible, we want to keep it down there to serve as that draw for traffic to keep people in the businesses.
I don't
and
think you need to
walking
draw traffic to downtown. There's plenty of traffic downtown.
Fair point.
Foot traffic.
Fair point. Marie, okay, please. Sorry if I missed your hand.
Cool question. So I'm sitting back here, I'm benefit of looking at all these beautiful boards, and I'm seeing multiple plans up. But as you said, the Dancoy solution is really no longer under consideration. I'm seeing the Copeland, which is this space. Is that also no longer under consideration? I know the chief indicated MAB is the MAB decided that is his preferred. So there's so much information that's been presented, trying to keep track of what's actually on the table.
Copeland is a site that we are aware of that the schools are likely not going to be using in the near future. Now, the near future is undefined. Okay, we haven't, they've had that building appraised for about $1 million. Is that fair, Jim? I think you looked it up one time. About $1 million. Okay, there were discussions at their last, meaning the school board's last meeting here this month, where they were developing their criteria for trying to possibly sell it. It's obviously being used right now as an office building. It has a bunch of land right here next to us, right? So, you know, we're throwing it out there. We've done the, as David calls, test for fit. It would fit to serve our needs. You've said that, right?
Absolutely.
You know, but there's a land cost. We've moderately told the schools we might want to talk to them without, you know, actually engaging in any discussion. But we've thrown that option out as another site that, you know, it would take some work, but it could fit all of our needs, and there's a cost associated with it. And it's one of these, it's on here. There's it's a $7.5 million option, basically.
In fairness to that, though, there is a group already that is considering making an option to use the site, okay? And it was discussed at the last school board meeting, and they set some parameters on that, leave it alone the senior center. And other than that, I can't remember the other parameters, but that was main one that I don't. Oh, that
they want to get close to appraised value.
Yeah, okay, and they'll get appraised value, talking about that. So there's another group already interested in this, and they had discussion with the school board about buying this site here.
Okay, so it's an option, but really it's not a serious proposal.
No.
The main focus is the map.
It could be if there was support for it, if everybody showed us, hey, that's a better combined use, I mean, then we would pursue it. We felt like we should put everything out to you and explain it as best we can, but we don't control that property today. We've done enough research to know what that cost would be. Part of this, again, is generating thought so that we understand what level of comfort you have with regard to the total cost of solving these three problems. I just want to, it is about 25 minutes to 12. Okay, and one of the exercises we wanted to allow to happen, because you can't see everything on here, was to allow people to view the boards and talk directly to our architect or the fire chief about them. So Phil, I see your hands up and you haven't spoken yet. I'd like to hear from you.
That information isn't displayed anywhere back here. Is it possible to get a copy or directly to a website that has that?
Yes. Yes, all of this will be moved to the website Monday, so that you can see it. Before we move to interactive workshop out there, does everybody have a feedback form?
Mr. Murphy's.
You should have found one on your chair when you sat down. If not, there are additional ones on the table out there. Please take some time today to tell us what was either confusing or, a good idea. I know, maybe you don't have enough ink, right? Okay. We're doing the best we can, but we do want feedback, so please write that down. Again, need, location, cost. Lieutenant King?
Yeah, just before you go ahead with the next project, I just want to say, we, as the Sheriff's Office, we did not get an opportunity to run our stats so the community can see how many calls we have at the north part of Dexter Township. So that means how many calls that are emergent with cars running through the city as lights and sirens. And then also, and I'm not going to say one way or the other of which property or whatever, I'm not going to get into that. But what I want you guys to look at is how many people use the trail down here, how many people are downtown, and then you're looking at removing all of our emergency services outside of town. So think about the response time bringing somebody back, where you have, especially in the summertime, a flood of everybody who is downtown, and then all of our emergency services are going to be outside of town. So I would like an opportunity to be able to pull our numbers, that we can show you our response times and everything if we had to respond from this outside of the city.
That would be great. That would be great. Ron, I don't think you've spoken.
So I want to say I appreciate the comments that the board made in qualifying their decisions. I'm assuming that this was important 21 years ago, and we have gone far down the road with this. I just want to say that the one advice to this board is don't keep kicking this can down the road. Make a decision, stand by it, support it, explain it to the public, but I think we've had a lot of confusion because personally I think that the information at the front end of the meeting actually confused, and it would have been more helpful to hear where the board, where the mayor, where you all stand on this, where the fire chief stands on this, the things that, I trust that you people, we voted you in to make a decision. We trust that you're going to try to do the best job you can. And kicking it down the road is simply not the best decision.
So to that, just one follow-up if I may. Has the service suffered for 20 years?
I guess I can't speak to that personally.
I've been here 18, and I think that the service that's been coming out of the fire department from the location that it's at has been excellent.
It's excellent.
It's excellent. It's excellent. So while we can say it's been talked about for 20 years, we have not ignored the fact that we're providing the high level of service that everybody expects. Okay.
But I agree, but you brought, the issue has come up and said you do need to consider this.
You need to go.
Yep.
Okay, you're welcome.
I have to go drive Zamboni right now, so unfortunately I don't get to mingle with folks in the back. But thank you everyone for coming out. Like I said, if it were easy, it'd be done. Because I'm not going to be here, if you have comments, especially if you're sitting next, you want to know what the heck I'm thinking, please contact me, Michels, ZMICHELS at dextermi.gov, sorry. I've already had a couple of 2 to 3 hour conversations with folks in the front couple rows here. Please pick my brain and share your thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach, for being here.
Sean, could I ask, what's the next step here?
Where
are we going after this? Because I can't stay either, and I'd like to...
We will put, this is a chance for everybody to talk to the architects and or the fire chief face to face, okay? We've got the room for another little while, so as long as people want to hang out, you can do that. All of this information will be posted on our website for others to look at, or if you want to look at it at a different time. But we're going to receive the information and look at what the feedback is and use it in our deliberation.
Also, we have a little giveaway for participation, so the person that asked the first question has a little something up here, and then if you turn over the pad of paper that you may have got when you came in, if it's got an X on the back, you also have something that Brian will give you a little takeaway.